what is Indian philosophy? Indian philosophy refers to the accumulated wisdom of those who belonged to India and claimed Indian heritage. And by India, I mean what we today call the subcontinent, including Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka, as the political divisions into nations came because of foreign invasions. And at the outset, I wish to clarify that Indian philosophy is not to be equated with Hindu religion, for there are atheistic as well as materialistic systems which are opposed to the basic tenets on which Hindu religion rests. Nonetheless, Hinduism is largely rooted in Indian philosophy. Hindu religion was initially called the Arya Dharma, or for the Aryans who came from outside India, perhaps from the Arctic regions, settled in India, and heavily contributed to the development of Indian thought and its way of life. It was also called Vedic Dharma, that is, the Vedic way of life, Vedas being their sacred scriptures. However, the latter was rejected with the emergence of Buddhism and Jainism, which developed as protest movements against the Vedic culture. By the way, Hindu, the word Hindu is not a Sanskrit word, nor does it appear anywhere in the Vedic scriptures. The word Hindu is a distorted form of the word Sindhu, the river, which we now call Indus. It is said that the Iranians and the Greeks pronounced the letter S as H, which led to this naming of those who were settled on the banks and to the east of the river Sindhu as Hindus. When the Afghans and the Iranians became Muslims and came down to live in India, they were called Muslims, while the rest of the population was called the Hindus. Now let us come to the meaning of Indian philosophy. It means darshan. It comes from the Sanskrit root drish, which means to see or a way of seeing. Thus, unlike Western philosophy, which is more about speculation, Indian philosophy is about experience or seeing the truth, which is why philosophers in India were called seers. See the self is most emphasized in mostly all schools of Indian philosophy. And the word darshan also means standpoint or perspective, which is why in India, philosophy is also called darshan shastra, a perspective to attain this vision of truth. Now, how did Indian philosophy emerge? The cause for the emergence of the systems of thought, whether theistic, atheistic, or materialistic, was the search for the questions of life. Questions like, what is the ultimate reality? How do we attain it? What is the purpose of life? What is this world? Why are we born? Why do we die? Why do we suffer? What is our ultimate end? How do we know all this? How should we act? The questions we just pondered over are both philosophical as well as religious. These questions needed deliberation, reflection, and maturity of thought. So, the tradition divided man's life into 4 stages. What were the 4 stages of life? The stages of life were: number 1, brahmacharya; 2, garhasthya; 3, vanaprasthya; and 4, sannyas. I'll repeat: brahmacharya, grahasthya, vanaprasthya, and sannyas. Now, the first stage, called brahmacharya, is that of a student. In this stage, a child must live in the house or hermitage of the teacher until the education is over. The second stage, grahasthya, is that of the householder, in which the child, who is now grown up, is asked by the teacher to go back to his house and pay the 3 debts. The first debt is to the forefathers, which is paid back by marrying and having children. The second debt is to the teachers, which is paid back by transmitting the acquired knowledge to the next generation. The third debt is to the gods, and that is paid back by performing sacrifices. The sacrifice could be made through the oblation of butter or wheat or rice or barley into the fire. The third stage is Vanaprasthya, which is that of a forest dweller. After paying the 3 debts and raising children till their adulthood, one can retire to the forest with his wife and ponder over the questions of life. For this is the time for self-reflection and self-discovery. The fourth stage and the last stage, which is sannyas, is the stage when one renounces every kind of attachment. He sends his wife back to the family, nothing attracts him anymore, he lives on begging and even changes his name so that he can disconnect with everything and remain absorbed in the search for the ultimate reality. It is to be noted that the last 2 stages are not obligatory, in the sense that people can attain spiritual knowledge without going through the last 2 stages. And there are examples in the scriptures which corroborate this. The great spiritual personalities like King Janaka, sage Yagyavalkya, sage Vasishta, they were all householders. Women were dissuaded from entering into the last stage as this was considered quite hard and harsh for them. But we can be sure that spiritual knowledge was open for women. For there is an interesting dialogue in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad between a husband and a wife on this issue of the attainment of spiritual knowledge. The name of the husband is Yagyavalkya and wife is Maitri. Now Yagyavalkya tells Maitri about his intention of taking sannyas and expresses his desire to divide his wealth between Maitri and his second wife Katyayani, so that he can put an end to all the worldly ties. Maitri, who is more spiritually oriented, asks a simple question from Yagyavalkya. She says, "If indeed this earth full of wealth be mine, shall I be immortal through that?" Yagyavalkya says, "No, there cannot be any hope of immortality through wealth." Then Maitri asks Yagyavalkya, "What shall I do with that which will not make me immortal?" Pleased with her words, Yagyavalkya asks her to come and sit down and reflect on what he explains. And there is a long conversation in which Yagyavalkya imparts spiritual knowledge about the immortality of the soul, the oneness of everything with the ultimate reality, that is Brahman, to Maitri. After this, Yagyavalkya leaves his home to take sannyas and Maitri takes to spiritual life. A mention needs to be made here regarding the fourfold division of Varna, which divided the society into Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. And each Varna was accorded its own set of duties. At the time of Manu, this division based on Varna became quite rigid. However, in the Bhagavad Gita, it was clarified that this division was only in accordance with one's profession and not by birth. The Creator made all men equal but not similar. Every individual in the world is born with guna and swabhav, that is, attributes and nature, which ultimately determine his actions and profession. And thus, he belongs to one of the 4 Varnas. If one abandons his Varna-linked avocation, he disturbs the peace and harmony of the society, for he is not justly performing his role in the society. The Bhagavad Gita therefore says, it is better to do one's own dharma or duty badly than that of another well. And we have seen many instances in the history of India where many people who were Shudra by birth became great emperors. Now let us come to another interesting question, and it is philosophy the same as religion? I stated earlier that Indian philosophy is not to be equated with Hindu religion, but it is important to know that philosophy and religion began as one in India. However, soon they took different routes, but the two paths did not oppose each other. The purpose of religion is to instill devotion in one's heart for God. And the aim of philosophy is to make one understand the nature of reality. The final objective of both is just the same, and that is liberation, or moksha, or nirvana, which means release from the cycle of birth and death. Religion prepares one by purifying his or her thoughts, emotions, and attitude towards the world, whereas philosophy perfects a person's understanding and helps him realize his true nature. Thus, it is the quest for the ultimate which keeps religion and philosophy tied to each other in India. Religion proposes a philosophic monotheism, meaning that there is one creator, which is evident in the Vedic hymns, and philosophy offers a monistic view which comes from the Upanishads and which says that there is only one reality. Now, what all this means will be clear as we move on to the later sections. But first, let us understand what is the relation of Vedas to the Astika and Nastika traditions. The classical systems of Indian philosophy have been classified into Astika and Nastika schools. The Astika schools accept the authority of the Vedas, while the Nastika reject their authority. So, we can see that all schools, whether Astika or Nastika, are somehow focused on to the Vedas positively or negatively. Now, the Nastika schools include Charvak, Buddhism, and Jainism, and the Astika schools include Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Purv Mimamsa, and Uttar Mimamsa. Now, it becomes necessary for us to discuss as to what sort of knowledge is stored in the Vedas. Now, let us understand what Vedas are. The word Veda means knowledge, and Vedas are the ancient sacred texts full of knowledge, and which is why we say that Vedas gave birth to Indian philosophy. Unfortunately, not much is known about the Vedic period, but whatever is known confirms of our rich cultural heritage. The truth contained in the Vedas is the eternal cosmic truth, which doesn't have a human origin. And the seers to whom the truths in the Vedas were revealed were merely instruments for the transmitting that knowledge to the generations to come. These seers did not belong to any one particular class or gender, nor did they belong to any particular time. And that is why the whole Vedic corpus extends over a period of 2000 years. It is also interesting to note that Vedic teachings were basically oral teachings. And after a very long period of time, they were compiled into books and given their present form. The Vedic period had a sacrifice and ritual-based religion. The sacrifices or rituals were conducted with full diligence and accuracy, as nothing written was available for reference and verification. The primary purpose of these sacrifices was to maintain cosmic order, and it was a cosmic duty of the individuals to perform them. And that is why the sacrifices were addressed to natural forces like the sun, the rain, the lightning, the wind, which were considered as gods and goddesses. Now let us turn our attention to the Vedic literature. Here it is important to know the distinction between Shruti and Smriti. Shruti means what is heard, and Smriti means what is composed or remembered. Vedas are therefore Shruti because they consist of revealed knowledge which was handed down from the gurus to their students orally. Smritis, on the other hand, have a human origin, and Manusmriti, the epics Ramayana and Mahabharata and the Puranas come under the category of the Smriti literature. Now, Vedic literature is divided into 4 parts. 1. Mantras or Samhitas. 2. Brahmanas. 3. Aranyakas. And 4. Upanishads. Mantra, of course, is a hymn addressed to a god or a goddess. And the collection of the mantras is called Samhita. There are 4 Samhitas, and I'm sure you all must be aware of their names. They are Rig Veda Samhita, Sam Veda Samhita, Yajur Veda Samhita, and Atharva Veda Samhita. These were compiled for the smooth performance of sacrifices. Now let us see what is given in these 4 Samhitas. Let us start with the Rig Veda. It is the most important and the oldest of all the 4 Samhitas. The reason why it is considered most important is that the content of every other Samhita is either similar to that of Rig Veda or is only an extension of Rig Veda. Also, whenever any mention is made about the Vedic scriptures, the name of Rig Veda always comes first. Now, Rig Veda has more than 1,000 hymns, which are invocations and invitations to God. They are simple outpourings of heart to invite God. Samaveda, which is the second Veda, is the songbook of the Vedic rituals. The hymns of the Samaveda are devotional in nature, which are basically to please gods. Yajur Veda is a combination of both prose and poetry and consists of the sacrificial formulas relating to the performance of the sacrifices. Atharva Veda, which is the last Veda, is generally regarded as a later addition to the Vedic canon, again in both prose and poetry. It is considered to have a dual aspect, holy as well as unholy. And there are songs and spells for the healing of diseases, for long life and health. But along with that, there are philosophical hymns as well. Coming back to the performance of sacrifices. 4 main priests specialized in the 4 Samhitas were assigned the duty of performing the whole sacrifice in a disciplined manner. The first priest, called Hota, dedicated to Rig Veda, would chant hymns in praise of the gods to invoke their presence and participation in the sacrifice. The second priest, called Udgata, well versed in Samveda, would sing the hymns in sweet musical tones to amuse and please the gods. The third, specialized in Yajurveda, called Adharvaryu, would perform the sacrifice in accordance with the strict ritualistic formulas and give offerings to God. The fourth priest, called Brahma, expert in Atharva Veda, would do the general supervision of the whole performance of the sacrifice. Now it is time to talk about a portion of the Vedic literature known as the Sutras. These are regarded as the connecting link between the Vedic and the post-Vedic period. The sutras provide information regarding the social, economic, and religious aspects of the Indian culture. And most significant works of the sutra literature are called the Vedangas, or the auxiliary sciences of the Vedas. The Vedangas are divided into 6 parts. 1. Shiksha or phonetics. 2. Kalpa or ritual instructions. 3. Vyakarana or grammar. 4th. Nirukta or etymology. 5th. Chanda or poetic meters. And 6th. Jyotish or astrology and astronomy. Now, Shiksha or phonetics concerns with the proper pronunciation of the words. Unless a word is properly pronounced, it does not make any sense, nor can it produce the desired result. Kalpa, which is the second Vedanga, is ritual instruction. It concerns with the procedures for the Vedic rituals associated with major events in life of an individual, like marriage, birth, and death. And it also concerns with the duties that a person ought to perform in the various stages of his life. The third, Vyakarana or grammar, is essential for understanding the basic ideas conveyed by the Vedic verses. For how can a person know the meaning of any sentence if it is not grammatically correct? So, Vyakarana is important. The fourth, Nirukta or etymology, is regarding the explanation of words which are unclear, so that the meaning of words can be understood in the proper context. Fifth, Chanda or poetic meters are important as far as the chanting of Vedic hymns is concerned. The hymn can bring its fruit only if it is sung or chanted in its specific meter or pattern. And the last is Jyotish or astrology and astronomy. It helps in calculating the astronomical details of the celestial bodies and gives the right time for performing the sacrifices. So we can see that these Vedangas make the understanding of the Vedas clear, easy, and fruit-bearing. Let us now understand the second kind of Vedic literature, which is called Brahmana. The Brahmanas are the starting point of Indian philosophy. It is said that without the knowledge of the Brahmanas, one cannot understand Indian religion, philosophy, and the importance of symbols, myths, and narratives in Indian literature. Each Samhita possesses one or more Brahmanas. They are basically the elaboration of the complicated ritualism of the Vedas. It was considered important to understand the significance of the performance of the rituals and the way they were conducted. The appendages to these Brahmanas are the Aranyakas. The word Aranyaka means a text composed or read in the calmness of the forest. Whereas the Brahmanas discuss the rituals or the sacrifices to be performed by the householders, the Aranyakas give a preliminary training to those who aspire spiritual knowledge and want relief from the cycle of birth and death. It is mainly for the Vanaprasthas. Thus, the Aranyakas mark a transition from ritualism to philosophical thinking. Now, the concluding portions of the Aranyakas are the Upanishads. Upanishads signify knowledge which loosens completely the bondage of the world and enables the learner, the seeker, to attain the self, the ultimate reality, the Brahman. Upanishads are the closing part of the Vedic literature, and so they are called Vedanta. They reveal the highest form of knowledge and the ultimate goal of the Vedas, which is moksha, or merging with the supreme reality, which is Sat Chit Anand, truth, consciousness, bliss. The mantras and the brahmanas are called the karmakand of the Vedas, as they both deal with ritualistic performances. The Aranyakas and the Upanishads are called Jnanakand of the Vedas, as they are the portions that concern with knowledge. Here, a realization comes that the ancient seers arranged the whole Vedic literature in conformity with the 4 stages of life. So, the Indian philosophical thought can very well be traced in the transition from the mantra to the brahmana, to the aranyaka, and finally in the Upanishads. Now let's come to the most important question, and that is, what have we inferred from this? And I want to suggest that we have inferred a gradual transition from the naturalistic and anthropomorphic polytheism through monotheism to monism. Now again an important question, what does this mean? It sounds so complicated. And to give you some relief, I want to tell you that it means that the pre-Upanishadic philosopher, on seeing the various phenomena of nature like the rising and setting of the sun, the rain, gathering of clouds in the sky, lightning, waxing and waning of the moon, was able to establish the principle of causality and believed in the existence of gods associated with each of these phenomena. And he glorified these gods as mighty and powerful, but did not give any form to them. To take the example of the sun god, he is described as golden-handed, seated on a chariot of 7 horses, and that's it. There's no more description. With time, however, these majestic and mighty gods were personified and given an anthropomorphic form. This is evident in many poetic hymns in which gods are praised about their looks. But the philosophical mind of these people was not satisfied with such a conception of many gods, or as it is called, polytheism. So, their philosophical tendency led them from polytheism to monotheism. And monotheism is the belief that there must be one divine power that works through all the gods, whether it is Indra or Varuna or Agni. Thus, one comprehensive God was conceived as the creator of the whole cosmos. Some people were satisfied with this monotheistic explanation of the cosmos, while others were still in search for the answer about the ultimate reality. And then they conceived of an infinite, eternal, unitary principle, the Brahman, who is in all and all are in him. Thus, monism was ultimately sought as an answer to all the queries. And monism is what is discussed at length in the Upanishads. Now, to lighten up this whole discussion, I would like to narrate a small story from the Chandogya Upanishad. There is this sweet child, Shvetaketu, who was a little naughty boy who had no intentions of going to the Guru's hermitage for education. His father, sage Uddalaka, scolded him once very badly. And disturbed by the anger of his father, Shvetaketu left his home in search of a guru. Now, after completing his education on the Vedas and the Vedangas, when he returned to his father's house, Uddalaka found that Shvetaketu had now become very arrogant and proud of his knowledge. To set his feet on ground, Uddalaka asked Shvetaketu whether he received the great instructions from his guru. Shvetaketu was perplexed, as he had never heard of this expression before. and he asked his father about its meaning. Uddalaka then said to him that the Veda and the Vedangas that he learnt at the hermitage of his guru consisted of Apara Vidya, or the non-supreme knowledge. And what he now wishes to teach him is Paravidya, or supreme knowledge. Immediately, the proud demeanor of Shvetaketu changed, and he humbly asked his father to tell him about the supreme knowledge of the Upanishads.